Hello and welcome to another Cork and Taylor Wine Podcast. Luke Taylor here, and welcome back. We're going to uncork the lighter side of wine. Just remember to subscribe, rate, and review. Follow us on Instagram, all that other crap. I don't really care, to be honest with you. If you want to support us...
You need followers, you do.
Well, whatever. I mean, you keep coming back, so I got one follower. Probably don't even listen to it, asshole. If you want to support us as we build and grow, because I'd really like to get to France and Spain and many other places to interview people in person like this man right here. He's in the flesh. Support us on our Patreon page, www.patreon.com/Cork and Taylor. Please subscribe, rate, and review. It only helps us, and it's cheap and free. So we've got Mr. October in the 2018 Master Somm calendar.
I didn't know there was such a thing, but I'll accept the accolade.
I just
you made that up.
I did.
Okay.
But you know what? It might be a good fundraiser for the court.
That would be interesting to say the least. Yeah.
Who else would you put in there with you?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the Mount Rushmore, the early guys. Although, wow, geez, that brings up some of the recent controversy.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah,
and maybe they do want to do it, get a little bit, different. And no, we won't go there.
Yeah, and I wouldn't go there. There's a lot going on.
Yeah,
I could easily run afoul of some issues.
So we got Larry O'Brien, my guy, only Ohio Master Somm.
At the moment, I was actually with Greg Stokes down in Columbus, who is now at Lindy's. Still has part of accent, obviously, and Greg he's a Master Sommelier waiting to happen. There are a couple other candidates in the state that are going to pass it.
But you're the only one.
At the moment, yes.
Oh, wait, so they're going to pass it, so you're going to rig it for them or something?
No. They will pass on their own merit eventually. And Stokes is brilliant. He's practically on the floor. He's great. He's a great academic mind. He's a great taster. It's just
Do you think he'd be good in the calendar?
Possibly, yeah. He's a young, handsome man.
There you go, young, handsome man. So that's kind of blown over now, thank God, the kind of the whole thing. And we don't need to really go into because we talked about it. But
I don't know that it's blown over, but there's resolution for better or for worse. I agree with some and disagree with others, but there's resolution and the court is moving forward. Perhaps in a direction that I don't always agree with, but we seem to be on the other side of the existential crisis.
Good.
And
what are we talking about? COVID? We're on the end of the existential crisis.
Well, for us, the existential crisis was the cheating scandal and the Me Too issues, and we seem to be moving forward. So that's a good thing. It's a good thing. Yeah,
that's good. So we're going to debunk some wine. I've got some questions for you, and I know you like to hold back and you bite your tongue. That's why I love you. First question from Angela Nadeau. She's a supporter on our Patreon page, one of, I think, like 4, but no, I'm always more than that. This is a really interesting question since you're a Master Sommelier. She asked about the process of getting started with blind tasting. How much time and how much money? Because it seems very daunting to her.
So it's interesting or coincidental that question comes up because I've recently been working with 2 small groups, one more often and the other just once recently. But I've recently gotten back into it and mentoring. Blind tasting is not a game that can be easily mastered. And it's not even a game. It's a process of elimination. It's a deductive process. The only way to become skilled at blind tasting is experience. There's no substitute for experience. You can't buy it. You can't force it. It has to happen at the rate at which it happens. And experience means tasting wine. So if you have time to dedicate every day to mastering this deductive process, you can get good really fast. Yes, it's expensive, which is why it's almost always done in a group setting to defray the cost amongst the members of that group. And the other thing that's important to note is it's not a gotcha game. Blind tasting isn't about the ability to determine that this wine that for all the world tastes like Napa Valley, Rutherford Bench is actually a Cabernet from the Tuscan coast. That's not the game. Mm-hmm. The game is classic wines from classic regions and classic grapes from good to very good vintages. So Chianti Classico, Brunello di Montalcino. It's not even really about the ability to discern Chianti Classico Reserva from a Brunello di Montalcino. Like, those are really pretty close. When you get that good, come teach me how you did it. Mm-hmm. I think it's only the local that can go, I see a difference between my fruit from northern Tuscany and that fruit from the region of Siena farther south, because there are differences in what goes into the production of those wines. The terroir, as it were, for northern Chianti Classico is different than it is down south. So, yeah, I think you could get to that point, but you can only get to that point if you're there every day tasting, and you're tasting the differences between those minute differences between those two places. The difference between Barolo and Barbaresco. That's not easy to figure out. If you can get to Barolo and Barbaresco and maybe recognize that it's a more modern producer, a more classic producer, yeah, you're doing really good. But ultimately, it's about classic wines. It's not a gotcha game. Yes, it does take lots of experience. Yes, it gets really expensive, and you defray the costs by being a part of a group. The other thing about being a part of a group is you learn from one another. Mm-hmm. You might have trouble discerning a particular fruit or non-fruit character, and by being with that group over and over, and somebody in that group helping you identify that, you'll grow and learn. You're not calibrating. You're not. You keep missing the acidity, and that keeps messing up your conclusion. I don't perceive acidity as well. I actually perceive acidity decently, but in general, if you don't perceive acidity well, being in that group where everybody says, hey, that's not medium acidity, man, that's almost high acidity, that's something you would learn to adjust your palate to. If you realize you're not particularly sensitive to a certain input, you understand that maybe you have to adjust that upward. So the group setting is really, really important for blind tasting.
What if no one likes you?
I've seen that, but
no, you have not.
The wine world's pretty tolerant. Yeah. There's always,
especially the more you drink, right?
There's always a few personalities that don't jive in a group. Come
yeah,
on, we all know that. But sometimes those personalities bring some really good stuff to bear. So you're tolerant. Well, they just have a certain skill or ability that they can be learned from too.
That's true. Yeah. That's interesting. So do you just start with a couple of, do you start basic? Do you go, obviously you have to buy some brown bags. You can get those probably at the dollar store.
Well, I don't necessarily think that blind tasting is about blind tasting all the time. And I coach this all the time. The blind tasting that we do in the exam at the advanced and master level, as well as at the certified level, isn't something I suggest you do all the time in terms of preparation. Yes, for the certified exam, you should print the grid off the website and you should use it and practice with it. But you shouldn't always taste wine blind. You should, in your tasting group, and it's rather than a blind tasting group, it's a tasting group. It's not always blind. You might want to put a variety of Sauvignon Blancs, a variety of Chardonnays, or a variety of Cabernets from around the world that are in that classic category. Chile, California, Napa, Sonoma, Bordeaux, possibly something from Italy that's Cabernet based from Tuscany, certainly Australia, possibly the Gimlet Gravels in New Zealand. And you want to put all those on a table, and they don't need to be in a bag. You're simply with your group going to go through this tasting, and you're gonna taste all these wines, possibly blind up front in a single blind format. Okay, I know what's in here. I know the 6 wines that we're tasting today. I don't know the order in which they've been poured. Let's go through the tasting, and then let's talk about why they are from the places they are. What identifies the difference between Napa and Bordeaux and New Zealand, or Chile for that matter. you don't have to always taste blind. It's the experiential piece is more important as a foundation than 4 minutes, 10 seconds, as we do at the advanced and master level. Put your calculus together up front, come to a conclusion, country of origin, region of origin, appellation of origin, grape variety, vintage, and level of quality if codified. That's the end game. But the calculus that you do, the deductive process that you do up front is how you get to the end. And that needs to be as accurate and polished as your final answer. And that practice of 4 minutes and 10 seconds in that method is important, and you have to do it. But what fills up that grid is the experience of tasting that you have over and over. Oh. It's the memories that you're able to recall sitting around that table talking about a certain character of aroma, flavor, texture, or a certain structural component, or how all those components interlock to identify the wine as that's Napa, or that's Bordeaux, or that's Chile.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
Shit, if she doesn't get that, that's an 11-minute bloody answer. You pretty much just took the whole podcast for Angela's question.
Well, it's a great question.
It is. And I struggle. You know what I struggle with? I can sit, and I'm a wine professional. I'm not a somm by any means. Or like people say they're a level 1 somm, but they're not. They don't tell people they're a somm, but they're level 1 or which is fine.
Let me respond to that by saying sommelier is not a certification.
And it's not a person from not a member from a country in Africa either, too, right?
No.
Because I always love that.
I'm not a Somalian. I'm a sommelier.
You're too big to be a Somalian.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
And long hair.
Yes, got that going on too. Identifying yourself by what level of certification you have isn't necessary. Just be confident and proud in where you are at the moment. Be humble to the subject. Don't bullshit.
Right.
Don't fake it. If you don't know it, simply say you don't know it and say I'm going to learn it. When you're interacting with a guest or you happen to be in an exam setting, again, the sommelier vocation is experiential versus academic. We've tried to add the academic piece through the court, and certainly WSET is an academic pursuit, but it's not necessarily about the practical application of wine in a restaurant or even in retail. It's about growing your academic knowledge of the subject, which of course comes into play in wherever you happen to be selling wine. Hell, the term sommelier is evolving. Sommeliers are no longer limited to the restaurant environment, and it irks me a little bit when I read certain writers who shall remain nameless saying, I don't know why they say they're a sommelier. They don't work in the restaurant business anymore. Well,
give me one
those
name.
are the very.
Give me one name you want to tackle. Come on, Larry. Come on.
My position as a member of Jackson Family Wines, I don't want to upset anybody and get them writing negative stuff. But there are people who think that sommeliers are limited.
Write it down on a piece of paper and I'll say it, because that way it didn't come from your mouth, it came from mine. It's like Gary Eberly. You know Eberly. He's like a pioneer in Paso.
And Syrah, absolutely.
Yeah, don't tell him that. He thinks he's like the prettiest person in Paso. Like, ooh. So he played football at Penn State for Joe Paterno. So I always asked, as you've gotten to know me, I asked some kind of off the cuff questions, and I asked him, who is one person you want to tackle in the wine industry? So he skirted the question. About 5 minutes later, he's like, yeah, there's probably one person in Paso I want to tackle. I couldn't get it out of him. No. He's also got freaking singing dogs. They're more like barking, but they're singing. You need to listen. You don't even listen to the podcast. You got to listen to that one. You will. Thank you.
Candidly, I don't listen to anybody's podcast because I simply, the free time that I have, I'm rereading A Tale of Two Cities right now. That's like that little bit of time that I've got.
Yeah, but the fact that you've read it once is impressive.
Well, I read it back in high school like everybody else. And now I don't know what got into me, but I wanted to read it. Yeah. Actually, it was because I read A Christmas Carol again, and then I figured Dickens is hilarious. He's funny as hell, and his ability to paint a picture of the time he was in was unparalleled. And That was a really bad time at Taylor
Yeah.
Cities. Anyway,
Charles Dickens was a big Moscato drinker.
Was he really?
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, he talks about wine, obviously, and
Yeah.
the Tale of Two Cities revolves around a wine shop, so it's
Yeah.
kind of cool.
So that's good. We just took 15 minutes of the podcast. Another
Sorry.
That's
I'm
fine.
talkative. You
No,
know
I'm
that.
Canadian. Sorry. So Sam Davidson, my guy, asked, how can you tell if a wine is one that gets better with age?
That is another one of those questions.
It's kind of like you looking
it's
at
the omnipresent.
Yeah, but it's
question.
also like looking at your potential wife and looking at her mom. Is she going to get better with age? Can you say that about wine too? You
Well,
gonna go
yes,
there?
I
Yeah?
think you can.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
you can look at previous vintages,
Right.
I guess the parents or the predecessors,
Right.
The ancestors of, and yes, you can look at.
You like that analogy? I'm pretty good.
I do.
I'm getting better.
I think, first of all, aging wine is somewhat overrated. And it's the question we get when we're doing a tasting and people are putting their glasses in front of us. And one of the questions we get more often than not is, will this age? And I kind of tilt my head and I say, well, why? Do you like old wine? And they tilt their head and look back at me and go, well, I don't know. I don't know that I've ever had old wine. Well, there's the crux of the issue. A very limited amount of wine produced on the planet in a given year is age-worthy, should be aged. But a lot of the wine that we consume is in that 1%. There are certain grapes in certain places and then certain vintages from those places that are more age-worthy than others. Reread the question so I get it.
How can you tell if a wine is one that gets better with age?
It's a really challenging question to answer.
Just answer the damn question. Come on, Larry. Give it to me.
It's not it's not a compartmentalized
Right.
question. It's not
Right.
easy
No,
to
I
answer.
know.
It doesn't
I know.
have an easy answer.
Do you think wines, the way they're kind of being made in certain parts of California, we'll talk about not the process or anything like that, do you think some of the Californias, which are coming more to the sweeter side of the palate, and they are Cabernet based, are you seeing more wines going away from being able to cellar more to drinking right away?
I don't necessarily think that those ideas are mutually exclusive or mutually exclusive. I don't think because a wine is more immediately drinkable. Now, the whole thing about, is there sugar in a lot of wine these days? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think the idea that a wine that's more immediately approachable is somehow less ageable. I think what is required for a wine to age, to answer the question directly, is balance. It's not about power, intensity. It's not about elegance and
content?
it's about balance. It's about the alcohol, the body, the richness lining up with the acidity and the tannin and the extract. It's about a wine's balance. All time does to wine is reveal imbalance. So the more balanced the wine goes into the bottle, the more opportunity it has to age and remain balanced. Certain grape varieties are more age-worthy than others, but again, there's no sort of rhyme or reason as to those grapes. We all know that Cabernet is a more powerful, inky, dark in appearance, intense black fruit and nose, mouth coating, generally higher alcohol, a little more chewy, puckery, dusty, gripping.
I'm getting hungry.
Yeah.
And thirsty.
And so we all think Cab can age, and it can. A lot of Cabs around the world are age-worthy. But then we look at Pinot and go, well, it's not as dark in color.
Yep,
It's a little more
thin-skinned,
ruby
yep,
red. It's a
yep.
thinner skin variety, and it won't. No, Pinot Noir from the Burgundy region of France can age 15, 20 or more years, rarely more than 20, 25 years. But yes, it's
Isn't
possible.
it crazy?
So why is Cabernet a more intense dark black grape, and Pinot, less intense, lighter ruby red grape that produces lighter ruby red wines? Why are they both age-worthy? Well, they have the things necessary, the structural components necessary, and they're balanced. Look at Sangiovese and Tempranillo, Italy and Spain, respectively. They're sort of in the middle between the two of those varieties,
Yep.
and they're age-worthy too. Look at fortified wines, port, or sherry or Madeira. They're
Right.
because of how they're made.
Right.
Geez, they're kind of armored for the long haul.
Champagne,
Madeira, Champagne is incredibly age-worthy. Why?
which is crazy.
Yes, we don't. It's lower alcohol, 11.5%ish, give or take, maybe 12%. But that carbonic the gas is an antioxidant, isn't it? It's pushing oxygen out. And vintage champagnes and great vintages, hell, you could, if you happen to have the right connection, you can get Dom Perignon from 1964 in a Magnum recently disgorged at the winery for some special event somewhere. Yeah. Now, are the bubbles what they would be like from a current release or 10 years? No, the bubbles are almost gone. It's almost like drinking brilliant white Burgundy or something along those lines. But yeah, champagne is incredibly age-worthy. So that question is really challenging to answer.
I'm giving you a lot of it seems like I'm giving you a lot of like kind of.
They're questions without definitive answers.
Right.
This question in particular, about
does price make a difference?
I want to default and immediately say, yeah, most inexpensive wines are not built to age. They're built for
like you're not built. You're not gonna really be able to lay down a $15 or $20 cab.
Generally not, but it depends on what we're discussing. Like,
right.
Are we talking about 20 years? No, but is a wine going to die on its birth date the following year? Like, no. Is Beaujolais Nouveau dead the following November, third Thursday in November? No.
Or rosé.
I had.
Yeah, I got you. I got you. Now I got you.
So rosé, I had a 2012 Domaine Tempier Bandol Rosé with Zuppa de Pesce the other night. It was an incredible pairing. I never really had the classic.
Almost 10 years old.
Yeah, and it was beautiful. It was subtly aromatic. It had everything you expected, and the freshness,
coloring,
was beautiful. There was hardly any oxidation. It was a little bit. There's a little bit of yellow leaking in to that light, ruby, that light rosé color, but I think most people would have thought this was a couple years old.
Yeah.
This wine was phenomenal. Now, is every rosé built to age?
No. Well,
no.
Right.
But do rosés die the following year? No, they can hang around.
Can you remember about 6-7 years ago? If the rosé is not the current vintage, we're not going to buy it. I'm like, you're freaking kidding me.
Yeah,
Come on.
It's just part of the American initiation into the world of wine. In the old world, they might want the fresher rosé, but they're not going to necessarily, walk away because it's an extra year in the bottle or something along those lines. And in particular, with certain rosés like Bandol some of those Spanish guys, Lopez Heredia, they released their rosé after about 10 years.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and the wines are phenomenal.
I couldn't sell that in Ohio. Sorry, we got a 10-year-old rosé. It is what
limited
it is.
Audience.
Well, yeah, limited audience. But I think both those questions, especially the second one from Sam.
It's a great question.
It is.
They're both one we get a lot, and it's not easy to answer.
Right. All right, I want to talk about wine tastings. All right. A couple of question with wine tastings. So some of these bigger events, right, where they've got 50, 100, 150, 200 wines, and you've participated in them and whatever, and I do them too, and I'm mainly from a I was supposed to go to the Union de Grand Cru Bordeaux. It got postponed. So I think it's going to be June. I'm going to go out to that and do some interviews, and it's great. It's great. But here's the thing. How many wines can you really taste at a wine tasting? Because here's my problem. I do these wine tastings. There's 100 wines. And listen, come on. I've got 6 or 8 at a table. After a certain point, you're just getting hammered. Right? I mean,
I tend to disagree. I think
the master.
I think you can taste. I don't know what the number is. I've never quantified the number.
Is it different for different people?
It is different for different people, and I think the environment in which you're doing it is different. The ability to walk around Union de Grand Cru or Tre Bicchieri or whatever big tour happens to be going on. The ability to taste a bunch of wines is dependent on your ability to stay focused, keep the distractions as at bay as possible to remain focused, and to spit constantly. If you consume anything, you are diminishing your ability to taste more wine. I'm not, and I see you're smiling, so I think I know why you might have a little bit of it. You gotta spit, and in a world of COVID. Well, there's no spitting going on.
Yeah.
Like people would be,
But I mean, okay, I've got a funny story, but I want to ask you this. So if you're not at a trade, because I mean, we do these trade. If you're at a event, let's say, I don't know, someone hosts it, whether like Galaxy has a big one in December.
Yes.
I know
Yeah,
750, you do one with
yeah,
750. Regency has them. We're talking locally, but every wine shop, restaurant, country club, big country club, the country clubs have them. How many can an actual consumer, not you and I, who are going to spit, are going to be focused, are also researching what's going to be poured to see what you really want to taste?
Correct.
So I had Michael Wang-Beckler, who's the head of owns Balzac Communications, who does great guy. And I asked him that, and he says, you got to have like a focus. So if you want to taste all the Margots, or if you want to taste all the the Palyac or something like that, you do that. But how many can a person, like if I'm just some random, no, it's random, a wine, a guy like Nevin, okay, a friend of mine, Nevin, and might be friends, whatever. He drinks a lot of wine. So he's not a good example. Someone else, how many can they honestly?
I don't know if Nevin will like that, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Nevin Nussbaum. And Laura too. Like how many?
If you're going to swallow a little, say it's an ounce of wine. If you try 12 wines and you swallow 12 ounces of wine in relatively quick succession, and you're not drinking a lot of water
or eating anything, that you just had 2 glasses of wine in like 35 minutes.
In 35 minutes, and because you're moving from table to table and sort of tasting in quick, you don't realize what you're doing. But you've just had 2 glasses of wine in 1 ounce portions, and you're not eating anything, and you're not hydrating because you don't think about hydrating.
Well, you're having fun, right?
And so what happens at about the 50th minute? So it took you a half hour to try those 12. At about the 50th minute, that alcohol is into your system and having its first, it has what? We know that alcohol first has that uplifting effect, but then very quickly we go over the edge and the narcotic effect.
And then the next day you really feel it.
Yeah, so I would say if you're tasting, literally, I shouldn't say tasting, if you're drinking, because there's a difference between tasting and drinking. Right. If you're tasting and expectorating, right? The great expectoration.
Yeah, but have you seen people really spit at a consumer tasting?
Not at a consumer event.
No.
I'm talking trade event. Like consumer events are different,
right?
Which is why states try to put limits on it, but
no enforcement though.
There's no enforcement of it, and It's one of those things. If you can get beyond 12 or 18 ounces of wine, in that hour and a half period, and not at the hour and a half, hour 45, 2-hour period, be kind of in your cups a little bit, as they like to say, as maybe Dickens might have said, you're a better man than I, and your constitution is a little bit different. Like,
well, I'm Canadian.
It's the Indiana Jones,
right.
In Tibet, where she has a constitution that can handle alcohol. Well, I mean, a lot of those stories are wives' tales anyway. Everybody is relatively similar in their ability to digest alcohol. Time. We've all taken those responsible alcohol service classes, and the answer to alcohol, digestion is time. It ain't a coffee.
Right.
It ain't a cold shower. There's nothing you can do. It just simply has to work its way through your system. One of the things
or
you
just
can
sleep
do is
naked
drink.
on a cold floor. That works.
People have done that.
I've done that before. My wife let me like that. Yeah.
Bushes. There's all kinds of things that are a result of excess.
I've slept in a bush in Venice. Yeah. We won't go there. No. So I got a funny story. So when I started my distributorship 12 years ago, I went out to California, and I'm like, well, I'm the type of person, and the same thing with the podcast. I try to do like 5 or 6 podcasts a day. And then also with all the driving, and as I've gotten older, I think I've gotten wiser in my 45th year of the Luke Taylor era. So I go out there, and I have my first winery tasting at 8:30 in the morning. I'm like, okay, I'll get up early, whatever. I go to bed early. I go to bed our time out there, and then wake up our time out there. So when I come back, I don't have any jet lag or anything. Right. That's perfect. So 8:30. Well, I'm tasting a couple of this guy's wines. He's like, oh, I brought my friend. I'm like, okay. So his friend brought 3 wines. So I think I had like 6 or 7 spat. Then went to the next appointment. No, didn't spit the first appointment because no one else was doing it. So I'm like, I don't want to insult the people. So the second one, Larry, I know. I'm learning from my mistakes, my friend. So, and I'm driving the whole time, but I had some lunch and stuff. So I'll never forget. I went to to this tasting, and she had meat. Like my lunch was crackers, meats, and cheeses, and I mean I ate the whole plate, and she kept pouring me wine. I said, I'm good, and I'm like, God, this is bad. So then I go to my next appointment. I'm at this winery now in Sonoma. I went from Napa back to Sonoma. So he's like, hey, do you want to taste any wines? I'm like, no, I'm good. So that was 3:00. I literally napped in the car for an hour and a half.
Yeah, it's
and I'm like, that's the last time. And it's like, but finally someone spat at like my second or third appointment, and then I'm like, screw this, like they're not going to judge me.
No, anybody in the industry is. If you're on this,
now
on
I
our
know,
side of the trade,
right? Well, that's why I know.
But
You're right.
That hour and a half nap is inevitable. It doesn't matter. You're a big guy. It doesn't matter.
Well, I'm skinnier since you last saw me. Thank you for noticing. Why are you looking at me like that? God,
we're two relatively large human beings. And it doesn't matter. The alcohol,
right.
Your ability to handle alcohol really isn't related to your size. To a degree, it is. But you got to hydrate. You got to expectorate. And I think I think the biggest problem for me at a big event is staying focused and not getting into a conversation, which makes you look like an idiot because you're being antisocial. Like, what's your problem? Why don't you?
Well, here's the thing: don't shower, pass gas, and wear a helmet. No one will bother you. I mean, let's be honest. All right, question I want to ask you because I see this a lot, and I'm curious what your opinion is. So I'm pouring wine for a consumer, and every time they have a sip or they finish their dump or whatever, they put water in a glass. Is that necessary? Oh, you like this one? You like this one? And we didn't talk about this before.
About this.
Oh my God!
People they're like
shaking the.
They don't even want water.
Water's
they
going
want
everywhere.
A new glass. Like my.
Yeah.
It's one of those weird. I don't know where this is based.
Right.
Like, who told them this?
Well, somebody did.
I'd rather have wine in my glass than water. Water, unless it's bottled water, and even then, that little teeny bit of wine. And I'll ask people, take that last little sip.
Right.
I don't even want a quarter of an ounce. If there's a few drips at the bottom of the glass, the next wine should theoretically run right over it. I am not obsessive compulsive about having a fresh glass or a rinsed glass. When you're, if you happen to be going from reds to whites, of course, maybe you want to rinse.
Right.
And I'll sometimes ask for just a little dab of the white wine I'm about to have as a rinse rather than water, particularly if I don't know if it's tap water. We know it's in tap water. It's chlorine and
well, especially if you're in Flint, Michigan.
Yeah, that's another issue altogether. But I mean, tap water isn't. It's got a lot of other stuff in it. Bottled water, okay. But even then, it's just not. Ultimately, it's just not all that necessary, and it's even less necessary to be rigorous and rigid about it and have to have it. Mm-hmm. But then again, the guest is always right, especially when they're wrong. So you kind of do whatever you got to do to make that guest smile and buy some wine.
Right. That's funny. But I see it all the time. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
No doubt about it.
My favorite question at a wine tasting is, which is your favorite wine at the table? And it's, my response is, listen, I got 3 kids. You're asking me which one's my favorite kid. And you know what? Honestly, I know which one it is. It's the one that won't push me off the hill.
Well, if you know who that one is.
Yeah, you know it too. Everybody knows that. Come on now. You know the one that will save you.
I get that question all the time, and I respond by saying, the same thing you do. I'll use kids. I'll use, that'd be like asking
girlfriends.
John Paul.
I say that I'm going to do girlfriends now. I'll be like, I got 3 girlfriends. Don't tell my wife. It's like, which one do I like better? I can pretty much tell you which one I like better on Wednesdays. I don't know. The Beatles. I've asked you that question. Who's your favorite Beatle? Or no, who would you get rid of? No, I asked you on one of the podcasts. I believe it was you. I said, which Beatle would you get rid of? Who would you replace to be on?
I think it would have to be John, because he eventually is the one that maybe caused the dissension. And it wasn't really him. Perhaps it was Yoko that caused a lot of dissension.
It's always Yoko.
I'm not the biggest Beatles fan in the world, so I don't know them, their story intimately. I haven't read biographies or anything like that, but it would have to be John. But that's what I say when I'm asked that question about favorite wine. That'd be like asking John, Ringo, George, or Paul. Who did I miss? Like, what's your favorite Beatle? I'm sure maybe they have one. I don't know. But to me, wine isn't about having a favorite. There are things that I get kind of infatuated with and gotta have it for a few times. But I think the music thing is really apt. If I overhear, like, well, let's talk Meatloaf, right? He just passed. God
Yeah,
rest
I know.
his
You
soul.
love Meatloaf.
I think everybody from the Rust Belt sort of did.
Yeah.
But it got to a point, like everybody in high school had Bat Out of Hell on vinyl, and everybody loved the album cover, and everybody loved.
Dude,
Bat
I thought you were in high school in the 50s.
Not that. No, it was in the 70s. 70s, and yet by the early 80s, I was done. Like I couldn't take it anymore, and it.
And he came back in the 90s. He was actually,
huge.
when I was in high school, he came back in the 90s all of a sudden.
As recently as 10 years, 5-10 years ago, because everybody that's now approximately 55 to 65 years of age, that's like comfort food. Meatloaf was like meatloaf. It were fried chicken. You wanted the comfort. You wanted the nostalgia. You wanted the familiarity of that. And he was an amazing guy.
Why did he call himself Meatloaf?
Oh, there's about 10 different stories. About 10 different
Maybe he was
stories.
eating meatloaf and he was probably drunk.
No, he was a big dude in school,
Yeah.
and that was one of them. And he was a fascinating character. Tortured. He was tortured by a desire to be perfect with his voice. And the older he got, the less perfect he was able to be. Yeah. And it tortured the hell out of him. But how did we get on Meatloaf? But you get bored with it after a while. Like you can't take it. You can't hear it so sickly sweet. You can't take it anymore.
Right.
And that's the same with wine. Like I don't want a favorite. I want to love it. Like, why choose? Keep the world a target-rich environment. I'd rather be able to enjoy everything. Why would I want a favorite? I just like everything.
Yeah. My next favorite question is, I really want that $20. I want that $100 wine, but I want to be like $20 for it.
And
you know what? You know what's impossible about? I tell them, you know why you can't get that? Because there's an $80 difference, and they just look at me like, what an asshole.
Well, I've always said, and I suppose I have to raise the price due to inflation. I've always said you can spend whatever you want, and I'll spend $50 wholesale. We'll bag them up blind. We'll have somebody do it for us. And my wine won't be better, but it'll be clear my wine belongs in the same breath as yours, in the same level of quality as yours. Clearly, there's some false economy in expensive wines. You're paying for more than just the aroma, the flavor, the texture, the balance, the elegance. You're paying for more than that when you buy rare, expensive wines. You're paying for supply and demand. You're paying for rarity. You're paying for perceived value, all that stuff. And I still think you can find good $20 wine out there, retail $20 wine.
That tastes like a $100 wine. But what does a $100 wine taste like? Because that's another level, right?
Yeah, well, we have to remove the price and talk about quality. But again, the fascinating thing about wine is it's utterly subjective. If you don't like that $100 wine, then why would you buy it?
But also, too, if you can't afford it or you don't want to spend the money, like I always tell people, buy wine that you're comfortable spending the money. It's like a car. If I can't afford a Porsche or a bottle of Screaming Eagle, why buy it? Just to say I have that Porsche, that Screaming Eagle? And I think that's where it gets a point where it's like, why, like wine cellars, right? Why do you have a wine cellar? Is it to tell people that you have a first growth O Brien, or you've got Screaming Eagle, or Scarecrow, or whatever, you're on their mailing list? Like that's great and all, but you can find some great wines for $10. You can find some great wines for $15. Now it's tougher now because of the big I word, igloo, or inflation. But
a lot of cost pressures on it. Right. We were talking about this before we went to record here, that there's pressures on costs around the world, and we've been through some fires in California. We've been through some weather issues in Old World Europe, and the supply of fruit's kind of lean, and costs are up, and there's all of our supply chain costs going up, and so wine's getting more expensive. But just like every other consumer good that we see, try finding a good used car these days. Try to find a car with 20,000 miles on it for a reasonable price.
Well, I told him, as long if it doesn't have a microchip, I want a deal.
So when you got that's like right around 1980. Are you going
That's
back?
all right. Hell yeah, baby. I'll put on Meatloaf in my 8-track, baby. Chicka, chicka,
I had an
chicka,
8-track
chicka.
player in my 76 Nova.
Oh, I'm sure
I
you
did
do.
Indeed.
Should have kept that. That would have probably could have gotten an extra $100 from him by now. But it's funny because what in your mind, okay, if you had to put a dollar amount on wine, where is that kind of like? I asked a winery this once. They said once you get over $150, it really doesn't matter.
Well, the cost of goods is pretty damn similar. Like,
Isn't that funny though?
The cost to make a Napa bottle of wine, and again, I know there are a lot of people in the industry that would vehemently disagree, and they'd have a reasonable argument with me, but ultimately, the cost per acre of land, the cost per ton of grapes, there is an average, and that average doesn't necessarily pencil out to extreme prices. There's going to be an average retail as a result of the cost of the land, the cost of the grapes, the cost of farming, all the costs that go into it. And there is an average price to do all this.
Right.
So why is one wine X and the other wine X plus 300%?
Right.
Well, because that wine's gotten great critical acclaim. That wine has a following in a certain per capita demographic group, right, in a certain cohort. Maybe $150 is right around where it is.
$300-$400. I mean, come on, $500, $600. I mean, Opus One, okay, and I'm not knocking Opus One.
And I will definitively state as we begin this conversation, I think to this day, Opus One is one of the best damn Cabernet-based blends made in Napa Valley. I've recently had an opportunity
At the $50 price range.
I'm not going to talk about price. They can get what they want.
Right. Well, that's the thing, right? Because they're smart enough to know if you keep raising your prices, and obviously things go up and and I get that. But as a capitalist at heart, and always will be, if someone's willing, or maybe in my mind dumb enough, and I'm not knocking on Opus One, I'm talking about a lot of things in life, not just wine.
We just said Porsche,
clothes, whatever.
Golf clubs, whatever.
Well, not on golf clubs. I'm just kidding. But there's a lot of things.
It's all fun and games till your ox gets gored, isn't it?
Exactly. And my ox is always gored, both hooves. So, but it gets to a point where they're at, I think, $250 retail in Ohio, and people are still buying it.
Yeah.
So you know what? Good for them.
Yes.
Good for them.
They've created the perception that their wine is worth that price and perhaps a value at that price. That's not up to us to decide. That's sort of always been up to the consumer to decide. We go back to the classification of 1855. How did the people that Napoleon III assigned that job to put those Bordeauxs that were, I don't know, maybe 100, it was about 150 years at that point, where the industry had really been established. Like, how did they organize it? Was it quality? Was it a blind test? No. It was the price being fetched per bottle at that moment. So the classification of 1855 with Lafite, Latour, Mouton, Lafite, Latour, O Brien, and Margaux. Mouton was elevated in 73. It was a second growth to start. Like, how did they put them first? Well, because they were the most expensive wines.
Right.
Well, why were they the most expensive wines? Because people were paying the higher price.
Right.
Well, why were people paying a higher price? Well, theoretically, because they were the best wines, I guess. I guess. Yeah. But again, subjectivity ultimately comes into the game, and you have to decide, well, I don't really even like that wine. Well, then don't spend the money on it.
Right. Yeah.
It's subjective, and pricing is beyond cost of goods equations. It's about a lot more than that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's true. And it comes down to what you feel is the value, and if you're willing to pay it.
Ooh, it's an interesting little side note. Let's go off on this tangent. So it
only took you 45 minutes to go off on a tangent.
Well, we've been off on tangents the whole time. So I watched the Kissimmee Meekum car auction, and I was blown away. Cars that you expect to sell for $2 were selling for $354 and even more. I was speaking to a gentleman who I happen to know that works for a very well-known Bordeaux estate, and he was saying in the last year, 18 months, there's never been more interest or activity in wine as an investment vehicle.
Really?
Cars, the same. I believe that those that have discretionary income are a little troubled by current market conditions, and they're seeking alternative tangible assets to invest in that are appreciable. Well, cars, wine, art. Look at the art world. Don't want to get political, but there are people paying insane prices for artists that don't really have a great reputation, but they think that it's going to be collectible and it will appreciate. So
are you talking about Hunter?
I'm not talking about anybody
Hunter
in particular. I'm not talking about anybody in
Bill
particular
Clinton?
who's painting with a straw.
Yeah,
George Bush 43 is a painter himself.
Yeah.
I don't know if his art's collectible, but
I'm going to start painting.
I think it's not a bad idea
Yeah.
because these alternative assets that have the ability to appreciate are very, very in focus for people with some money.
The Cork
right
and Taylor Wine Podcast
is a great investment opportunity, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes,
Because he wants to go to Spain.
I do. I do want to go to Spain. I want to go to many places. So, do you love when a sales pitch, like a salesperson you overhear at another table, says, "Our winery is next door to Screaming Eagle or wherever"?
I'm guilty of that.
Oh, you bastard! Do you
We
really?
all do that. Come on.
What do you name drop?
Well, what I talk about is that, as an example, we own a roughly 1,500-acre estate in Santa Maria Valley. And it's not just Santa Maria Valley. It's a particular place within Santa Maria Valley called the Santa Maria Bench. Well, there's another famous grower directly to our west that we share a fence line with. And that famous grower, I'll name their name because they're famous and they're great. Everybody wants fruit from this grower. If you're a Pinot Noir Chardonnay producer, you want Bien Nacido fruit from the Santa Maria Bench.
I've never heard of that.
Bien Nacido. Right?
Ben Nacido.
Bien Nacido is the vineyard directly to our west, and we own Cambria Estate directly to their east. We share this terroir with them. Well, they get a certain price for their wine. And more often than not, they make their own wine under their own label, but more often they're selling fruit to somebody else who vineyard designates that wine. That vineyard has become famous. It gets big scores from the critics. The wines are generally produced in small quantity, leading to a higher price. And yet here we are in the same exact terroir. And it define that word terroir as geography, geology, elevation, aspect, climate, farming. Our farming's a little different. They're biodynamic. We're sustainable. But when you get right down to it, we share this place with them. We share the ability to grow high-quality Pinot Noir and Chardonnay with them, and they fetch a certain price. Well, our estate wine is less expensive, and it behooves me to mention that, hey, Bien Nacido is a killer producer, and here we are right next door, and we're making, a less expensive bottle of wine that we believe has all the attributes of that more expensive bottle of wine. So of course you say I had the ability to enjoy 2012 Cologne Ségur. And Cologne Ségur is not far from Lafite Rothschild, right? And well, of course, you say that Cologne Ségur is not far from Lafite Rothschild when you're having Cologne Ségur because it's not far from Lafite Rothschild, and it's worth mentioning.
But how much do you think there's a lot of? Do you think there's a lot of similarities in taste and what have you?
I do.
You do.
Now there are places where 300 yards can make a hell of a lot of difference. Burgundy's one of those places. You move 300 yards in Burgundy, you might have gone from Montrachet to Pouligny-Premier Cru to the Rabbit Patch, Pouligny Village, right? Like literally that could happen. You could have moved out of the most amazing, most coveted, desired block to a really good block to kind of an ordinary block, right? In just 300 yards. But that's kind of an exception to the rule. The locality is what breeds the character of that wine more so than the winemaker. If you ever meet a winemaker that says, my wine's better. Well, actually, you might meet a winemaker. Most winemakers will tell you they don't make wine in a winery. They grow great grapes, and their job is to sort of guide that grape juice through the process of winemaking and reveal the place rather than themselves in the wine. So, okay, then we should be talking about the locality. because it's, the locality is what creates the character in that wine. The terroir, the locality, is what creates the character in that wine. So, of course, we're going to name drop. That's what we do.
That's what we do. Okay, last question, then we're going to do a little bonus part. So wine lists. I see on a lot of wine lists, and I probably see Kendall Jackson, but we're not going to talk about Kendall Jackson. Because you actually debunked it. I was quite impressed the last time you brought some wine. It was Kendall Jackson. I was surprised. I thought it wasn't going to be so. So you've done good, okay? So you see a lot of, don't look at the paper while I'm talking to you, Larry, please.
I'm trying to cheat.
You are a cheater. Did you done your sommelier test too?
Never.
Yeah. It's pretty hard to do that, I think. So why do you see on a lot of wine lists, Caymus, Silver Oak, Rombauer Chardonnay, on a lot of restaurants?
Popular.
Yeah.
It's a very simple answer, popular. Yeah. As sommeliers, we want you to have a great experience. We're selfish enough to believe that we should be part of that experience. You as the guest, we want to influence you. We want you to love your experience, but we want to be part of that experience. We're selfish. And we can't accept the idea that you're going to drink what you always drink when you dine with us. You're going to drink what you always drink when you're in my sphere of influence. I don't want to do that. However, with maturity, you begin to realize if that's what they want, give them what they want. Yeah. Make the guest happy. Guest experience is more important.
That's good marriage
than your
advice.
Satisfaction.
Great marriage advice.
Yes.
Larry.
Acquiesce. That is the word. Yeah. I've gotten in the greatest trouble I ever got into with a guest was a dispute over Silver Oak, and it just should have never happened. I should acquiesce and make the guest happy. If the restaurant's really busy and the server's really busy and the somm's really busy, it's a great asset to have wines that make people happy. Yeah. Wines that people want to order. And Rombauer and Silver Oak and Caymus and Kendall Jackson,
you can go down the
and
list.
La Crema and Mayomi and on and on and on. These are wines that people are comfortable with and make them happy. And it is a benefit to have those on your list because you can't touch every table. You can't serve every bottle. You can't suggest every bottle. So if a server's busy and the guest orders a bottle of Mayomi Pinot Noir, then God bless America. You're diminishing your ability to generate profitable revenue if you ignore popular, comfortable, familiar items. You're diminishing your ability to generate profitable revenue if you ignore less expensive price points. You're diminishing your ability to generate profitable revenue if you don't have some unique things that the guests might be looking for. But it's balance on a wine list.
But here's the thing, though, and I do agree with you. I totally agree with you. But here's my thing: is people will spend $200 for a bottle of Caymus when they go to the grocery store for $75. That's whatever. I think
it's a little more than that, but I know where you're going. I know
which
where
is
you're going.
Crazy to me.
They'll not complain about paying a triple markup for a bottle of Caymus, but then they'll complain about the markup on your wine list in general. I totally get where you're coming from, and again. In the service world, in a restaurant setting, the guest is always right.
No, they're not, Larry.
Especially when they're wrong. Yes, they are. It's the rule that we must abide by. Right. It's the rule.
Well, it's their experience, right?
Yes.
You are providing that experience. It's not what you tell them a thing. But what kind of drives me nuts, now I'm going to put my distributor hat on, is, I've got some great wines, as you know some of them, you've tasted some of them, and they can't get on a list because you've got every bloody named Napa Valley cab on that list, but I can't get Laird or Keenan or Corley Monticello or
all killer Napa Valley producers, and the struggle is real. It's no
the struggle is real on the Cork Taylor Wine Podcast.
It's no different than us at Jackson Family selling. We've got a new little project called Capture from Pine Mountain.
I've seen it. Okay. Yeah, looks good.
That's that's a bottle of wine that's going to be on wine list for
you
about.
You gave me the white wine at the
Sauvignon Blanc and
Ben Curtis
Lee's
Foundation.
Context, yes,
that was nice.
Gorgeous, but again, there's
that
a
wasn't
perfect
a Sauvignon
example.
Blanc.
It was a
Sommelier.
100%,
No, hell no.
100%
No,
Sauvignon
hell
Blanc.
no.
It was the Lee's contact
Right, I
that
know,
made
I
you
know,
think
I know.
that.
Yes, I know.
Matter of fact, we were out this week with a semi-Sauvy blend
Yeah.
that I could have proven the difference. I don't have a bottle with me.
Well, thanks.
It's okay. It's Mendocino County Cabernet. Oh my God! It wholesales for $45 a bottle. Good luck. That's where the struggle comes
Right.
in, and you scratch and claw for one placement. You scratch and claw to get the server training done the first time, the second time, the third time. You scratch and claw to get a few bottles sold, but once a server has success and sells a few bottles, other servers see that.
Yes.
Server selling that bottle. Then there's a little bit of a contagion that occurs
Right.
within the restaurant, and then you can say, hey, those guys down the street, we're name dropping again.
Right. Yep.
Those guys down the street, they've sold a 6-pack in the last week, and I know that their
You
guests are
want what
kind of
you
like
can't
your
have.
guests.
Yep.
And you can begin to establish. We used to say, and I think we can still say, wine brands are built on premise. They're built in restaurants. I think we can still say that to a degree. I think the world's changed a little bit.
Most brands, yes.
And particularly expensive brands. They are built by trialing them in restaurants, and then the guest hopefully seeks them in the retail environment. That is the challenge beyond all challenges. And again, it's incumbent upon us as people in the trade to talk to the buyer, the programmer of beverage in a restaurant. It's about balance. You can't just have all the things that are popular, because then, like, what do they choose? And that brands your restaurant. Your wine list brands your restaurant. So if you have what everybody else has, well, why do I need to come see you?
Right. Exactly. I know.
It's just about striking that balance.
Yeah. Well, Larry, thank you so much. I
Pleasure.
appreciate it.
Great to see you again.
You keep coming back. You're going to stick with us because we're going to do a little bonus section. Just remember to subscribe, rate, and review on all the Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube channel. Join our Patreon page and follow us on Instagram. Thanks a lot for listening. I feel like we uncorked some of the lighter side of wine and debunked some.
Yeah, there were a lot of great questions.
wine.
I appreciate it. I'd love to do this again. Love to get another set of questions.
Fantastic. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Cork and Taylor Wine Podcast.